Good morning. We are here at the Global Korea Convention 2021 Best Practices session. I am Kim Min-ji and I am the Master of Ceremonies for today's event. During the Best Practices session of the Global Korea Convention 2021, we will be hearing from 5 agencies about their best practices. And also, please refer to the website of our program for the real-time online broadcasting. Simultaneous interpretation is being provided. Channel number 1 is Korean and number 2 is English. Let us now begin the third day, first session for the Best Practices session. The presentation will be given by the Korea Rural Community Corporation. The title of the presentation is Enhancing the Resilience of Communities and Ecosystems in the Upper Athi River Catchment area of Kenya. The presenter is Jeong, Deputy Director of KRC Overseas Project Office.
Good morning. I am Jeong of the Overseas Project Office at KRC, Korea Rural Community Corporation. In my presentation today, I'd like to share with you our project which began 3 years ago, which was on water environment management project for the Athi River catchment area in Kenya. I'd like to begin with a short explanation about GCF. Although you may be familiar with it, I just wanted to remind you of what GCF does. GCF was established with the purpose of having a funding established for multilateral financing for developing countries' climate change response. It was established in 2010 and the headquarters is in Incheon here in Korea. And so the developed countries provide the financing, and this is to support both the mitigation and adaptation efforts of the developing countries. And this is the organizational structure, which looks a bit complicated, but I will just explain the part that is in the red box. GCF board is the highest ranking decision-making body, and recently President Moon Jae-in had attended the UNFCCC COP meeting, and so at the guideline of UNFCCC there's an annual report that is given by the board, and the secretariat of GCF, which is in Songdo, does all of the administrative work. An important organization would be the accredited entity or the AEs, and so it is in charge of preparing the project proposals and implementation operation of the projects. And so these accredited entities would play the most important role in any GCF project. Next, we have the recipient countries, NDA, Nationally Designated Authority, and so the NDA of a country is the lead agency for carrying out the GCF projects in the respective countries, and there are the delivery partners who are in charge of carrying out the project in the field. And so because accredited entities are very important, let me reiterate. They play the role of a channel in implementing the GCF funded projects. So it is in charge of the entire process of monitoring and supervision from preparation to final report. So we have to receive approval from the GCF to become an accredited entity. Korea Development Bank was the first AE in Korea, and recently KOICA also received the AE approval. And so KRC right now is in the process of registering ourselves as an AE. Let me now go on to an explanation about the project that we were involved in. So let's look at Kenya first. It is in the mid-eastern part of Africa, and the capital is Nairobi, and you will see that there's a huge lake here. This is Lake Victoria, and the water from Lake Victoria flows to the north, goes up to Egypt. This is the Nile Kyoung River, and from Ethiopia there is another Nile flow this year and to this area, and this is the Athi Catchment area, which is the location of our project. You will see a close-up of the Athi catchment area, and the catchment area means that all of the water that flows here, the rivers, goes into the Athi River and flows out to the sea. And so the total area is about 58,000 square kilometers. And Korea's land area is about 100,000 square kilometers, so you can make the comparison. And there is Nairobi located here, and the second largest city, Mombasa, is also located in this catchment area. Mombasa is a port city. There are many issues that the area was facing. First of all, water shortage was increasing. There were a lot of flooding that was happening, but in terms of adequate water resources monitoring equipment and capacity, there was a lot of shortage. And so to resolve these problems, we decided to introduce water resource monitoring system and information management system, facility development, as well as capacity building. So let me now explain the background of this project, how it began. NEMA is National Environment Management Authority in Kenya, and this is the AE of GCF in Kenya, and so they submitted a proposal to GCF, and there was a lot of requests for updates, and NEMA said that we lack capacity to make this proposal be successful, and so Kenya had requested for assistance from the Ministry of Environment, and the Ministry of Environment of Korea through KT, Korea Environmental Industry and Technology Institute, began a project to assist Kenya and NEMA. And so KRC and APEC Climate Center, APCC, participated in the project. So APCC was in charge of the GCF funding proposal. KRC was in charge of the feasibility study as well as the environment and social impacts assessment report. And so this was the initial concept note that NEMA had developed, which we had improved into an official funding proposal through collaboration with APCC. So you will see that there are a lot of stakeholders in Kenya with whom we had meetings. So Ministry of Water, for example, NEMA, and even Meteorological Department, and then we did data collection and conducted site survey. So this is the title page of the funding proposal, and this is the technical feasibility study report, first page. This shows you the contents of this feasibility study report. So I will now go into the details of this report. First, we looked at the climate change situation, climate pattern in Kenya, and you'll see that the temperature compared to the past 30 years, or during 30 years, had gone up, or by 2100, temperature will increase to 3 degrees further. And then the rainfall will increase by 20% by 2100. And Kenya has a national water master plan which we reviewed, and you will see that there is a huge gap between the annual available water resources versus water demand. So as we go further into the future, the amount of available water resources is going to be very limited, and so the situation seemed very dire. And so we looked at the climate patterns and also other current situation, and we came up with the vulnerability assessment. And the assessment result was the Integrated Risk Index, or IRI. And we divided this further into the IFRI, the Integrated Flood Risk Index, and the IDRI, Integrated Drought Risk Index. There are many different indices that we looked into. We also met with the agencies involved and responsible, and we collected all this information. And if you looked at the flood index, you will see that there will be worsening of floods for the next 30 years. For the drought situation is already very severe, and it's going to continue to be severe for the next 30 years. And I will be explaining later on, but in this Athi River catchment area, we analyzed only the top 4 zones or areas, and so I will explain the detail later on. We also collected and analyzed the related documents and materials. We looked at the water master plan, the catchment management strategy, as well as the Water Act and Climate Change Act of the country. And this shows you the Water Resources Master Plan contents. And there is also a report on National Water Resources Management System, and it talks about the need to strengthen monitoring networks as well as improving information management system. And Kenya also has the Water Quality Management Strategy, and it points to the need to enhance water quality monitoring systems to also manage better the water quality data. These were some of the capacities that would be necessary in the future. And we also looked at the catchment management strategy, and what they emphasized was flood and drought management, climate change adaptation, as well as monitoring and information management. So to select the target area, we conducted a field study. The Athi River catchment area, we wanted to include the entire area, but we had a limited budget, and so we looked into the population density and the level of damage, and we selected the top 4 counties in the upper catchment area as our target sites. And right now the Kenya government is expanding this project or model throughout the entire catchment area. This is the water resources monitoring system results, survey results, and we determined the most urgent areas and decided to focus on these areas as our target zones. These are the surface water points that we used to collect data, and this is the water level telemonitoring points. And so we actually visited these sites, and you will see that they're very outdated. They had poor connections, telecommunications connections, and the facilities overall were dilapidated. And you will see that there's been a lot of losses in damages in the equipment and facilities. And there's also the groundwater monitoring points that we looked at. And you will see that we visited all these sites to do actual field survey. Next is the rainfall point. And here also the same, we conducted field studies. So now, by this point, we understood what the problems were. There was lack of auto monitoring systems, and there was also problems with regards to data transmission, poor transmission, sensor problems, and others. And the electricity supply was not stable, and so we decided to introduce appropriate technologies that could address these existing problems. So water level, water quality, water resources, we needed a integrated management system to monitor and manage all of the different aspects with regards to water. So you will see that here there is a very simple data accumulation systems, and the time interval is every 3 hours. But this was not used very efficiently and not used for decision making. And so this is the concept that we had developed for the project. So we plan to use the data collected on site automatically, and this information will be collected and monitored at the monitoring centers. And so we said that we would develop the system as far as having this real-time monitoring system in place. And so let me show you a diagram of how this works. So in these waterways, we could have reservoirs and rivers, and we would have solar PV systems in place and ultrasound equipments and other sensors installed here. And we could have mobile devices such as smartphones used to receive real-time information and then make the decisions on a timely fashion. So this is how the entire system would work. So all of this information from the floodgate would be collected. It would transfer to the information joint use and management system, and all of that will be connected to the integrated water management systems, and the decision makers could use this information for future policy planning. So we had worked in Thailand, in Uzbekistan, and in other countries as well. More recently, we completed the Uzbekistan project. This was an ODA project at Kuwait's funding, and I have some photos from the site, our project site in Uzbekistan. So there's CCTV, solar PVs installed, and we also had to ensure grids for stable electricity supply. And again, the information from site is managed, and it's not just the control room that receives that information, but in each of the different localities, they have their individual systems to monitor and check on the real-time data. So, of course, we had to ensure that the Kenya people and the government would receive capacity building training to be able to utilize these systems properly. And so this is the GCF, and then National Treasury of Kenya. Below that, NEMA and National Project Steering Committees and the councils, as well as the different county governments, were all involved. And so we divided them into different levels. Let me explain what they are. Level 1 is the national institutions. That will be NEMA, the Water Resources Agency, Meteorological Department. Level 2 is the regional institutions, the county governments. And level 3, the community-based entities. And so we decided to divide it into different levels to provide customized capacity building courses. And then we have this diagnostic chart that we developed to check the level of capacity and the needs of each of the agencies and institutions involved to ensure that we could provide customized capacity building programs. So we began with this needs assessment first. This is a result of the needs assessment for Kenya's Meteorological Department. And so they had certain capacities that they were asking for, and then we came up with some proposals, some measures that would address this need that this particular agency has. Let me now talk about the benefits or the effects of this project. Since this is a catchment area project, management project, the direct effect will be flood mitigation, drought mitigation, and cost reduction for water supply. And there are also indirect effects such as reducing waterborne epidemics and increasing of household income. And so this project was approved at the 30th GCF board meeting in 2021. So we received about $10 million in GCF funding for the implementation. Let me now talk about the significance of this project. We do a lot of ODA projects in developing countries, but mostly it's the multilateral development banks, the MDBs, such as World Bank and ADBs, that carry out these projects or provide the funding. But in our case, we utilize the GCF, Green Climate Fund funding, which is specialized in climate change response projects for developing countries. And it was a Korean public agency, KRC, that first began or initiated the process. We began the proposal first. And so integrated water management is projects. The demand for these projects is on the rise because there's a need to further respond to climate change. And so that is another significance of this project. And by carrying out this GCF project, we were able to increase our expertise with regards to carrying out GCF projects. And so we can look forward to participating in more GCF projects in the future. Korean government is now pursuing the Korean Digital New Deal project's implementation. And so we believe that these kinds of experiences, these kinds of projects will enable us to implement our New Deal projects further in other countries in the future for more exports and expansion of the business or project scope. So with this, I will conclude my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you for the excellent presentation. We now have a discussion session, and we have Lee Kyoung, who is a senior researcher at the Climate Technology Cooperation Team of GTC Green Technology Center. So please go ahead. Hello, it's nice to meet you. I am Lee Kyoung from GTC. Let me briefly explain what GTC does, and then I will go on to give my discussion of the presentation on KRC, and I think this background information will be useful in enhancing your understanding. So GTC is the 25th government-funded agency in this field. So we do policy, development, and research under the Ministry of Science and Technology. So we are an R&D institute. And in August of 2018, that's when I first came to GTC. And before coming here, I had worked in another agency, and I was the person in charge of developing the proposal for this particular project in Kenya Athi River catchment area. And so this was I have this much affection for this project because I was involved from the beginning phase. And there was a lot of government support that went into the project. And we're very thankful that we were able to contribute to Kenya through this project. While you were listening to the presentations, you may have had that thought cross your mind, but in fact, a lot of Korean technologies and experience had been shared through this project, and KRC really did a good job with regards to implementing the project. So, in fact, we had applied for a lot of GCF projects by the different agencies in Korea. GTC did that, and many other different agencies. Since GCF was established, because we now have a specialized funding for climate change, we decided that we wanted to apply to participate in these GCF projects. Of course, there are many criteria that you have to meet to be successful. But in the case of this Athi River catchment area, it's very uniquely 100% Korean technology, Korean agency-led project, which was successful. And what is the significance of this project? Right now, Korea is trying to pursue different ODA projects overseas, and the project has proven that our level of expertise in technology is on par with the global community. And also, the developing countries has a huge need, particularly with regards to these kinds of technology. Of course, even previously, Japan had gone into the Athi River catchment area, and many other countries, many other agencies, for example, the Netherlands, had come in to assist with the water management. Here we saw Denmark, Danish equipment installed there as well. However, we wanted sustainability, and it was only Korea Rural Community Corporation that was able to provide such sustainable solutions to the problem for the stakeholders here. So we did a lot of field studies and meetings with the stakeholders. And as you can imagine, it's very difficult to access all of these sensitive information from the stakeholders in the locality. But I think the people here opened their hearts to us, and I can tell you that we really worked hard. Both sides really worked hard because I was there on the site. And so having a public agency come from Korea to share a lot of these experiences and technology, I think that is what the local residents had appreciated. And the fact that many different Korean people, Korean agencies collaborated together here in Kenya for the success of the project, I think that's another success factor. Today, the topic is ODA in the era of COVID, or development cooperation in the era of COVID, and the capacities and role of Korea. I think that's a broader topic that we are talking about today. Each of the different agencies and institutions would have their strengths, and to share with you the strengths that we have. As you heard earlier, many of the Korean agencies, we are already ready to provide assistance and share experience. So how are we going to ensure that these pearls are strewn together well to create a beautiful necklace? I think that is the area, that's the kind of capacity that we need to work on further. So I think this GCF project was an excellent example because it was a long-term process which gave us very good experiences which will be very helpful in conducting future GCF projects and other related projects overseas. If KRC becomes an AE of GCF in the future, I believe that Korea will be able to share even more know-how and technology capabilities with more countries in the future very successfully, thereby also encouraging many Korean SMEs to launch their business overseas as well. And so I was involved in the development of the proposal for this project. Of course, there are a lot of ups and downs and challenges. In terms of opening the hearts of the local residents, I have to admit there were major challenges, but I was surprised every time because the KRC always was, of course, they were very technical in their approach, but then they knew what was possible and what was not possible. They worked very professionally. They were indeed the experts in this area. And I think this kind of expertise had contributed to the success of the project. The Athi River catchment area in Kenya, you may not be familiar, but elephants and a lot of different wild animals live in the safari area here, and you need to provide water to this area because this is where the Masahi ethnic group lives, and it also affects the environment of the Kilimanjaro mountains. And so for the local residents, this area is a matter of life and death. Their livelihood depends on the water resource management in this area. And so I think this is really a very important project. And secondly, the KRC, well, for the other MDBs, they have a lot of experience with regards to these kinds of projects, and they focus on climate change, what is the future risks and vulnerabilities of this area with regards to climate change. And so they have very mid to long-term plans that were developed and provided, and they provided the technologies that would address all of these issues. And that is what KRC had done in this case as well. And it's not just providing fish to the local residents, but teaching them how to fish. So, because initially they did not have the capacity to interpret the data that they had collected, they did not know what to do with the data that they had collected. And so KRC had assisted with the planning to ensure, as well as the capacity building to ensure that there is sustainability to the local residents' self-management of this catchment area. So I think that is the basic goal that we have to have in mind as we pursue other projects in the future. And Mr. Park Ki-jung gave very excellent presentation, very detailed presentation. So thank you very much. And we really look forward to more successful projects led by the KRC. Thank you very much.
상당히 박사님 바쁘신데 이렇게 또 와주셔서 일단
So first of all, I really appreciate that the senior researcher has come to this session as a discussant. Thank you very much for sharing very good statements with us. Water quality, water resources management, particularly for farming or irrigation. I mean, we have excellent technologies with regards to this specific area. But if we had just the technology or capability, I don't think we would have been successful with this project. We were able to succeed because of all of the help from Dr. Lee of GTC. She provided us with a lot of assistance throughout the entire process. And these projects are focused on climate change response for the developing countries, and the beginning of that is persuading the local residents to participate in this project in the first place, because this is something that they would need in the future. And I think from that very initial phase, Dr. Lee was very much involved and gave us a lot of assistance, so we appreciate that. We are emphasizing climate change a lot recently. We recently had the UNFCCC COP meeting held also, and as you know, I visited Malawi recently, and going around in the different sites in Malawi, I was thinking that, what would be most helpful to the local residents here in developing countries? Do you think that building a home or house for these people would make them happy? Well, rather than that, I was thinking about what the people really needed immediately, urgently. In each of the towns, we saw that the residents were lining up to receive drinking water. They did not have any waterworks system or water supply system in place. So I realized that they need clean water to use every day. And of course, climate change and water resources are directly related issues. And since we are an agency in charge of water management, we realize that the kinds of contributions that we can make in the Kenya project as well as in other developing countries as well. So we really need to be mindful of what we can do specifically for that developing country. For KRC, what we can contribute would be water resources management capability. And the fact that this project was selected as a GCF project, I mean, that was something that we really wanted to emphasize because it's an important aspect. There's a global environment facility which was sort of a predecessor to the GCF. And the GEF, there was a GEF project also that was focusing on climate change. And the fact that we are continuing to emphasize climate change response broadly and more specifically water resources management means that there's going to be more of such project demand in the future. But of course, this is going to require long-term process, and because of the characteristics of water, which is that it circulates and it has to be used as a public good. There's so many stakeholders and so many countries involved in conflicts over water issues. And Mr. Park Ki-jung also did mention during his presentation, but there has to be an integrated water resource management system. However, oftentimes we find that depending on different functions, different uses, that is the only focus. There's a very simple approach to try to provide or use or manage water resources oftentimes. But then we also find examples where in some developing countries, they have no infrastructure with regards to water at all. And so we really need to think in an integrated fashion because, again, water resources is directly related to the daily lives, the livelihood of the local residents. It is connected to urban development, rural development more broadly, and also it is necessary not just for daily life, but it is a livelihood and it is important for economic activities. So the core technologies that go into water resource management being customized in a very quick time frame and applied to developing countries will be very important. And so this KRC system that was introduced in this project, I understand that KRC can downsize its model and systems immediately, and that was included in the feasibility study for this particular project. Am I right? Yes, that's right. KRC has expertise in water management, and so at our headquarters and for our different branches, we have a system for integrated management in place. So we have the system fully established here in Korea, and as ODA projects overseas, also, we try to apply this system in countries like Iran, Uzbekistan, Thailand, and others. So, of course, we began with small-sized pilot projects, but then we realized that we could scale them up in many other countries. And so we began, initially we began on a small scale, but then after we do several pilot studies, we will be able to expand those to the entire region or the entire nation. That's what we realized by conducting these projects. So I think a good example could be we could have success cases within Korea, from within Korea, the package itself being very successful. We could try to apply that to developing countries. Initially, begin with the small-scale projects, and then with the accumulation of successful cases, we could continue to expand the project in the locality, and also this contributes to enhancing the expertise and experience of KRC, thus forming a virtuous cycle. So this is one of the strengths that Korea has with regards to development assistance or development cooperation. So we are not sticking to Korean style only. We are not stubborn with that. But in the field, when we work, we always try to be very flexible to try to customize and reflect the needs of the local residents. But of course, there could be some stubbornness with regards to specific technologies that really work and that is applicable in all different projects. But then I think these are some of the strengths that Korea can utilize, particularly its digital technology is something that we can really utilize further in these kinds of projects in the future. Yes, you are very right. We, of course, we have bigger dreams also. We want to ensure that this project will not stop at just information management system, but we want to develop it further into business models for for the private sector to come in as well. And so, would you like to share your thoughts on that as well? KRC and our GTC, our technology cooperation team, has been collaborating and receiving a lot of technology assistance and providing a lot of these technology assistance to other countries through our collaboration. So we really need to continue to cooperate with KRC because it has a leading expertise. They have a lot of successful cases as well. And so I always ask for a lot of help from KRC. In May of this year, our president had led the P4G summit, and that was a project introduced during the summit. In Vietnam, it was faced with a similar problem. The Mekong River downstream area was faced with similar issues as with the Athi River. And so there were a lot of flooding. There's also drought, not enough water, a lack of drinking water. There's a lot of waterborne diseases. So all of the problems of this region had to do with water. And Vietnam is an area where Korean companies have gone into a lot. And so Vietnam and Korea already has very close relationship, and at the Korean ASEAN meetings, we have very close collaboration also. And during the May summit, the first climate change response bilateral summit was with Vietnam. And so we introduced these kinds of projects to Vietnam, and these kinds of integrated water management system can be introduced in the Mekong River, and also think about the next steps, which is the participation of our private sector, our businesses. So we already have developed a basic model. And so we're going to try to really implement that project in Vietnam in earnest in the future. And we are in the process of applying for patent for specific technologies at GTC. And after this project is approved, then many different agencies, include KRC, could participate in the process. So strategically, we will continue to look into other possibilities in other developing countries, and we look forward to a closer collaboration with KRC for developing customized models, and then we have to go into Vietnam and then the next country and more countries in order to share more of our experiences with the other developing countries. So I think that will be a good future direction that we could take. Yes, I think I did an excellent job of inviting our discussant today, because Dr. Lee has shared with us so much valuable insight. And so I would like to request for continued cooperation with GTC. Yes, I think these GCF projects, they're very important. Because of COVID, we've not had a lot of progress, or very slow progress in this project. And I did know that unofficially this project would be approved eventually. So finally this year we received the approval from GCF. This is based on our technology and our capacity. And so we continue to knock on this door, and the opportunity has opened to us. And in fact, to my mother, I boast a lot. I go to tell her that we will be going to Kenya for this project. And also this contributes to carbon neutrality as well. So if we have integrated water management systems, what kinds of benefits can we think about? Can we expect? Oh, that's a very difficult question, but let me share with you one example. So when we provide water to the fields, so there is a period in which you provide water to the field, but then we can reduce the timing or the duration of providing water. So, if it doesn't affect productivity of the harvest, then it would be best to minimize the use of water. And so this ensures that if there's low level of water, the hydrophobic species will not grow. and this is going to reduce the amount of carbon emissions. So we have that methodology, understanding, and we have the technologies in place. So these kinds of carbon neutrality projects will also be possible in the future. And at the UNFCCC Glasgow summit, there were 120 countries that participated, and President Moon was there, and they talked about the land-based project for forest and arable land. And so they talked about finding ways to reduce carbon emissions, particularly in the forest and the agricultural industries. So that was a declaration, global declaration by the world leaders. And so what was just explained is reflected in this declaration. And we also upgraded our NDC carbon emission reduction goal to 40%. And so one technology that we can utilize to reduce carbon emissions is to adjust the amount of water that is used for irrigation, for farming. And of course, there's also carbon-based value that can give us a lot of benefits, and there is already technological methodology that has been established, and we could use the technologies for calculating carbon emissions in these kinds of projects more in the future, and we look forward to very successful projects in the future. And when that happens, the KRC is going to be able to share more of such successes with other countries, with other agencies, and will be another stepping stone for further success in the future. Thank you. So climate change response projects, carbon emission reduction projects, in these future projects, we would like to ask you for further cooperation from GTC. Thank you very much. Please give both speakers a warm round of applause.
We will take a short break and reconvene at 11 o'clock for the second best practices session. I will meet you soon. Thank you.